Good evening and welcome to the 2019 WNY News Now Republican Senatorial Forum on WNY News Now. I'm Justin Gould. This evening we will feature a number of question and answers with the two candidates running for the Republican primary in just a matter of days. The two men are running for New York's 57th Senate seat. We will ask these men to respond into questions and issues from across the district. Let me introduce our guests. Joining us are Chautauqua County Executive George Borrello and Allegheny County Legislature Chairman Curtis Crandall. Good evening to both of you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So there are a number of issues right now that this district and all of New York State are facing, which I'm sure a lot of our viewers and your voters are very, very interested in. A little bit of rules to go over first, though. Both of you will have 1 minute to respond to each question and 30 seconds each to rebuttal to that question and to your opponent's response. You will both make a 2-minute open and closing statements, starting with Mr. Crandall, who won a predetermined coin toss that happened just moments ago. So, Mr. Crandall, you have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for putting this forum together. And my understanding is that it's the first time this type of forum has taken place here, so glad to be a part of it. I am currently chairman of the Allegheny County Board of Legislators. I've held that position for 14 years, which makes me the longest serving chairman in the county's history. I became a legislator in 2000, so I've been 19 years on the county legislature. Prior to that, I was involved in town government, the town of Canandaigua. Those familiar will be Houghton College, about half of Rushford Lake. So as far as being familiar with local government from town and county, I feel that I certainly am and have been there. I'm actually the involvement on the state level, the county, the issues that we have dealt with over the years. When this opening came up, felt, well, this is the time that maybe I could step up and make a difference there. So I would really like to be able to take the experience that I've had in leadership from Allegheny County to Albany. I've held majority leader and chaired Ways and Means and budget to help straighten out our finances for the county, and just an array of different leadership type positions. We have dealt with, and I hope that we get into some questioning along those lines, but we've dealt with issues that were very difficult in Allegheny County that hadn't gotten solved or taken care of in the past. So by, when I came in as chairman, we started to address some of those and get things taken care of that, like I say, hadn't been done in the past. So I hope I have a chance to expand on some of those.
All right, Mr. Borrello.
Yeah, good evening. Justin, thank you for having us here. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you to the WNY News Now team for putting this on. As you may all know, I'm the Chautauqua County Executive, but I grew up here in Chautauqua County, and just to give you a little background on myself, I grew up in a working class background. I went to college, and shortly after college, I started my own business. I built that business from nothing into a successful supplier to the hospitality industry nationwide. My business experience led me to also want to get involved in politics, and in 2009 I took my first running for the county legislature because I wanted to affect change. I wanted to make sure that we had that positive impact, and so I did run and win. I did beat an incumbent Democrat at the time, and we got off to a good start. We had a very divisive legislature back then. In fact, the media referred to us as the useless 25. And what myself and a lot of freshman Republicans did was we changed things. We started by downsizing government. We downsized our legislature from 25 to 19 members. And then we started accomplishing good things by a very simple philosophy of if it's a good idea, we'll support it, and if it's a bad idea, we won't. And we went on to lower property taxes. We went from being one of the highest taxed county property tax rates in Western New York to now among the lowest, and without sacrificing services. We've done good government in Chautauqua County, and we've done it with collaboration. In 2017, I retired from my private sector career because I wanted to serve the people full-time as the county executive. And in a county split 50-50, Democrat and Republican, roughly, I was able to capture 64% of the vote. And in a short period of time, in my 18 months as county executive, we've accomplished some great things. A new successful strategy for Chautauqua Lake, uniting people in economic development, and many other things.
All right, Mr. Borrello, thank you. Our first question is directed at Mr. Crandall. Just this week, the state legislature failed to pass the legalization of recreational marijuana, and we've seen a lot of people interacting with us online, and a lot of them seemed very disappointed in that. We want to ask you, where do you stand on that issue?
I do not support the legalization of recreational marijuana, and I've paid close attention to Massachusetts, which is right next door, and some other states that have. And New York, in attempting to move this forward, is really falling short on addressing some of the issues that need to be addressed before you even look at that. Some of the policing, how are they handling the driving under influence? There's nowhere near the proper training and officers in place for that, let alone the social issues and the health issues, and it just does not make sense to me. I understand that people would like to see that moved forward, but it's not going to happen. I'm not going to support that as a senator. I don't think that that's where we need to be.
All right, Mr. Borrello?
I'm also against the legalization of recreational marijuana. As a county executive, I quickly understood that the rush to approve this was all politics on the part of the governor, and that grasp at this money he thought he was going to get. And unfortunately, that will pale in comparison as to what the costs will be, especially at the local level. The revenue will be kept in Albany. Local government will be responsible for things like the changes that are going to be needed in law enforcement. I spoke out against this in Albany as part of the County Executives Association. I was able to address my issues with a gentleman by the name of Axel Burnaby, who is considered the architect of the governor's recreational marijuana law. And he admitted, after going back and forth for a while, that much of what I brought up was not considered. So I presented that there in Albany. It also became an integral part of New York State Association of Counties, NYSAC's presentation in their opposition to recreational marijuana. There's just no common sense there. It's going to create huge burdens in government, and the amount of money that he has projected will be a drop in the bucket to what it will cost to manage it.
All right, Mr. Crandall, do you have a response to that, or would you like?
Well, I'd like to add or talk about the agricultural side of that, if I can. Mm-hmm. And we have, seen and heard from some that feel that this is going to be a boost to agriculture. I'm not seeing that. Massachusetts is spending all kinds of money in its big conglomerations, its big business. It's not a local family farm operation to put up these pot plants, if you will. So I'm not seeing where that's going to have any effect with a positive effect on agriculture in the 57th district.
All right. And I'm sure we will have more discussion as the campaign rolls along too, and in the comments as well with people watching live. Shifting issues just a little bit. Recently in the news, we probably all saw that New York State will now be giving driver's license to illegal immigrants. We want to know where you stand on this issue, and this question is for Mr. Borrello to start with. And if you oppose it, is there anything that can be done if you're elected to bring it back to the way it was?
Yeah. I am absolutely opposed to it. I think it's just a horrible idea to begin with. I've spoken out against this, and I think it's a little more nefarious than just giving driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. It's also about the ruling class in Albany creating a permanent dependent class of people that are indebted to those to those power brokers in Albany. That's what this is all about. Our corrupt ruling class in Albany is looking for ways to have more and more people that are dependent on government, and this is just one more way for them. And also the idea of these people being able to register to vote. They have the motor voter. There is no system in place to stop those people. When they're prompted, when they're getting that driver's license, saying, "Are you registered to vote?" And if the answer is no, would you like to register to vote? Local government at the DMVs is not capable of handling that. And you're going to see voter fraud. And in upstate New York especially, where so many elections turn on just a handful of votes, we cannot afford to have any voter fraud. And that's the true motivation here.
Mr. Crandall.
Yeah, this is not good legislation. It's going to create problems as we go forward. And I see it similar to the SAFE Act, where it keeps getting built on. And whether it's registration or other things, there's sanctuary state. I mean, it just keeps escalating. So this is not good legislation, and I don't see any good coming from that. Obviously, it's passed. We have to deal with that. But the clerks across the 57th and others going to create problems going forward.
Okay. Just to add on to that, our county clerk, Larry Barmore, stood strong and said he would not issue them. You also had Mickey Kearns in Erie County, who's a Democrat, saying he would not do it. So this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is truly about an upstate values and common sense issue. And I'm glad to see, certainly, that everybody's united. So you ask, what can we do about it? Well, we can stay united in upstate New York. It's all about bringing that upstate value and bringing that message back to Albany. We can push back against this radical liberal agenda that's coming out of New York City. It's really about, again, control and about being able to bribe and your way into getting what you want from a power standpoint.
And we will talk more about that divide of sorts between upstate and downstate coming up in this forum in just a little bit. On to our next question, though, starting with Mr. Crandall. There is a strong move right now across the state and across the nation to mandate vaccines for all New York State children and eventually all adults. What is your opinion on mandating these vaccines and people's right to personal body ownership?
Well, it's having an interesting conversation about that today, and actually I went back talking about the polio and the polio vaccine and when that came about, and the person I was talking about that with was from that era and that time. So to answer your question, I support vaccination, and I think that there are times when it absolutely has to be done. The polio is an example of that. We've had outbreaks in the New York area and that, but it's not an easy subject, and certainly there are divides on both sides of the issue on that.
All right, Mr. Borrello?
Yeah. No one likes when government compels you to do something, but at the same time, we have a responsibility to public health, and that's what this really comes down to. Those folks that choose to not vaccinate their children then also have to understand that there may be some severe limitations, going to public schools, things like that, where other children will be exposed. And as Mr. Crandall said, there's been outbreaks, deadly outbreaks, and that's an issue that has to be addressed. And so you have the choice of if you're going to stay within your own community, but in the world we live in today, that's nearly impossible. We don't live in isolation anymore. Just getting on an airplane and traveling across the country, exposing vulnerable senior citizens and children that are too young to have gotten vaccinated to those type of things is just it's a human health issue that has to be addressed. And I understand the people's concerns about vaccinations, but at the same time, you have to understand the very limited way that we control those things.
There's a balance of what can and should be done, and I'm of the age, and again, that conversation I was having earlier, we used to line up in the hallway outside the nurses' room in school to get your annual whatever it was that you needed for your shot or your vaccination. I think that the concern is swinging too much the other way. I know that there's concerns about what it is that's being used for vaccination and that, but it has to be done properly, and it's the health of all of our population is a responsibility, and it has to be done the right way.
All right. Well, thank you. This next question is first directed at Mr. Borrello, also in the realm of public health, the opioid epidemic. And if elected to this office, what would be your plan to work with other lawmakers to try to come to some sort of solution to it?
I would do what we did here in Chautauqua County. One of the first things that I did was to create the CARE Task Force, the Countywide Alliance for Enforcement and Rehabilitation. And what I found was that there were a lot of people working on this crisis, but we're not working together. They weren't sharing information. They weren't sharing our limited resources. So that was the first thing we did, was to bring everyone together in law enforcement, our DAs, our police, various police departments and drug task forces, people working on treatment, rehabilitation, recovery, all working together in one group to share those limited resources. And we've had good success here now in Chautauqua County. We had a dramatic drop in opioid deaths here for the first time after years of increases. So I would take that model to Albany, that we need to collaborate, communicate, and ensure that if we are funding things, that we are funding them and really mandating that people do have to work together collaboratively. And that's what's not being done in Albany right now. We need to have a better, more efficient way of approaching this.
Mr. Crandall?
Yeah, we did the same thing. It was putting together a task force, a group, bringing all of the groups together. And one thing that we've had a good success with, and maybe that was done here as well, but we brought in some, recovery, people that have been through the program and recovered and been there with other issues. And we actually have our July meeting at the county fair, and we had one that came in and spoke in an open forum like that, which was very effective. And it was a lot of it's faith-based. We've brought in and utilized faith-based help as well. Once we got that up and going, it's transferred over. It falls under the umbrella of our community services board, and is moving along well, but the funding needs to be balanced as well. And we've seen that in a lesser populated area where percentages are percentages, but we need to be able to have the resources to deal with them as well.
Just one more thing I'll add to that. The peer counseling, which I think what you're referring to, is really important. Those are the people that have been through it, and we see that. I was at Lakeshore Hospital, where 1 year ago they opened a chemical dependency unit with beds there for the first time, which has been great help. And to listen to the stories of those folks who have survived addiction and who are now working with others and saying, "I've been there." And one woman said it really well. She said, "Life doesn't get perfect, but it gets good." And that's really, to hear those stories and understand that even though the statistics show that recidivism is high, these are real people that are recovering.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly an epidemic that, I think at first maybe certain groups thought, well, no, I'd be immune to this, and then God forbid they realize they're not.
Crosses all socials.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So on to our next question, which before we that's the last question before we do head to our first break. Kind of keeping it a little more broad, what is the biggest issue that you think, Mr. Crandall, that the district is facing at this moment?
Well, I think it goes beyond the district. I think it's the whole state. I think it's the trend of people leaving New York, and there's a lot of reasons why. But you look at the taxes, the property taxes, and the operations in New York, economic development efforts in that, I think could be improved upon. But let's take a look at why we're losing population. We've dropped below California and Texas and Florida. We're losing congressional representation in Washington because of that. And why are these people leaving? We should have an environment where people want to come to New York and live here. We live here, we enjoy it, we raise our families here, we enjoy the outdoors and the blend that we have. We've got a state that has, from seashore to mountains, right, and almost a blend of all America right here. And people should be coming in, not leaving. That's the big issue. There's a whole bunch of pieces to it.
Mr. Borrello?
Yeah, what Mr. Crandall described is all correct, but those are the symptoms of the disease. The disease is our oppressive state government that has created this environment where we have this radical agenda out of New York City that has cost us dearly in upstate New York. It's eroded our manufacturing base. It's cost us our population, our kids leaving. And what we need is more local control. We need less taxes and a less oppressive regulations that have driven people away. But we also need to be able to tailor things for each community. Be able to let our colleges tailor their curriculum around the needs of our local community. And that's what I will fight for in Albany, is more local control to ensure that each community, each area, each region is allowed to decide for themselves what's best for them. We are a beautifully diverse state, but that diversity also means different challenges, different assets, and different opportunities. And that's what I'll fight for in Albany as your next state senator.
It's been talked about the property taxes, and the governor has thrown different things out to attempt to help that, and talked about shared services and that. But the share that the counties pay for Medicaid is astronomical, and it's the only state in the country that does this, and it needs to be addressed. If that were to be picked up and shifted in a different way, and I think that there's enough money floating in Albany that could be done and done over time, that brings dollars or saves dollars on the local county level to where it can address the property tax issues.
All right, great discussion by both of you, and we have a lot more to come, including talking about abortion when the WNY News Now senatorial primary forum continues.
The break.
Now open in downtown Jamestown, Pearl City Hops, restaurant and tavern.
I have some real old-timey dishes on there that I'm just giving new life to. Like there's a shepherd's pie on there that's gonna have some bison in it, real thick hearty gravy. Then I'm also doing beer flights. We're pairing it with a set of sliders, a set of tacos, and a set of mini rolls. So everything's gonna have its own pair, so you can get a taste of a little bit of everything and all the beers. We don't want to be known as the restaurant in the hotel. We want to be known as Pearl City Hops.
You're watching WNY News Now, where coverage comes first.
From our doorsteps to Albany, it's about 300 miles, but most days it's like we're worlds apart. Hi, I'm George Borrello. I'm running for state senate because Albany politicians don't listen, don't lead, and they put their radical New York City agenda ahead of us.
George Borrello was born and raised here. He built a successful business before entering public service. George knows what it takes to help employers grow and prosper. It starts with ending Albany's policies crushing local businesses.
Our way of life is under attack. People are forced to leave here to look for opportunities. This has to stop. As your senator, I'll focus on training programs for workers so everyone has the skills to secure good-paying jobs and local businesses can grow and thrive. I'm George Borrello. I'll stand up for our hardworking families, businesses, farmers, and veterans every day. Albany is ignoring us. It's time they start listening.
Conservative Republican George Borrello for State Senate, the voice we need working for us. Vote primary day Tuesday, June 25th. Paid for by Borrello for Senate.
I listened. I brought the community together to meet with elected officials. I am accessible. I stand for full transparency and accountability. I will continue as your mayor to do these things. Vote June 25th. Andrew R. Liuzzo.
And welcome back to the WNY News Now Republican senatorial primary debate. This question is for candidate Borrello. New York has made some dramatic changes to the abortion law recently. What do you think needs to be done with that, if anything? And would you try to repeal that law or work to amend it if elected?
Absolutely. I think it's horrific. The idea that in New York State you can have an abortion literally as the baby is coming out of the birth canal, if you so choose. It is totally against everything that I believe in, and I think the vast majority of New Yorkers, especially those here in the 57th Senate District, would disagree with. You know, in my office recently, I have two people that had babies. One of them was born 8 weeks early, and the baby, other than spending a few days in the hospital, was fine. And the idea that that baby could have been aborted, not just then, but for weeks afterwards, how is that not murder? And I think this has just gone well beyond, you know, they want to wrap this up as a women's health issue, but it's not. It's, again, it's about this radical New York City agenda that is to appeal to people that want this type of outrageousness in New York State. And I'm absolutely against it, and I work hard to repeal it.
Mr. Crandall, where do you stand on this issue?
I'm mirroring Mr. Borrello. I am appalled at the legislation that came out, and I think that you know, that 57th district, the common folks across here are going to feel the same way. If there's any way to turn this around and repeal it, that should happen. I think in time it will have the pendulum swing back to where we can have support and revisit this. And I'd like to be there for that discussion. There should not be abortion, in my opinion, period. And to take this to this level is just appalling for me.
I would just say that I believe this is another example where we can unite legislators in upstate New York and push back against this radical agenda from New York City. And we may be able to have you know, that success, but it's going to require someone who has a experience, or, you know, working across a broad spectrum, reaching across the aisle, you know, and understanding that it's going to take negotiation and collaboration. And I have a strong record of that, both as a county legislator and as the county executive. We've gotten a lot of things done by being able to set aside politics and working in the best interest of the people.
All right. This next question, we'll start with Mr. Crandall. Recent court cases have challenged the SAFE Act and the state pistol permit law in Albany. Where are you on repealing or not funding the SAFE Act and possibly changing the current pistol permit law?
If it was up to me, the SAFE Act would be repealed tomorrow. And this is an example where they come out with legislation like this or movement like this over the weekend, overnight. When that happened, our board was actually getting ready for a meeting the day that came out on that Monday. And we quickly put resolution together and sent that to the governor and to our representatives opposing that. But what you've seen is to continually add on and pick away at the Second Amendment rights. I'm an Eagle Scout, and I told a story the other night of you know, when I was growing up, I took a .22 long rifle on the school bus for a project that we were doing. It was times have changed, yeah. But we're certainly sportsmen, and the safety of the firearms and that should be taught at a young age, but we can't infringe on Second Amendment rights.
Mr. Borrello.
I absolutely agree. The SAFE Act should be repealed. It was a horrible government overreach. Again, this is the typical Saul Alinsky, radical liberal, never let a tragedy go to waste philosophy, and that's what happened. The state legislature and the governor took this tragic event that happened and used that to violate their own rules when they passed the SAFE Act. You know, and this is what this is about. As I said the other night, you know, we don't lose our freedoms in a big wave or a big flood. It's one little trickle at a time. And this is another example of our basic constitutional rights being violated in New York State. And that's why, no matter what your opinion on gun rights is, you should be appalled by the action that was taken to bring the SAFE Act around. They violated their own rules. They didn't give the time for public to give comment. And that is truly horrible government overreach. It is absolutely egregious, and that's why we should repeal the SAFE Act.
Anything to add?
I think we're on the same page with that
Yeah.
one. We had the Bolivar Richburg School shooting team, clay shooting team that just won some awards there, and part of the legislation would do away with that type of sport,
Yeah.
but yet do away with the safety and a learning experience for the
Right.
youth as well. So it doesn't make sense.
No. All right, on to our next question, and we did touch on this briefly earlier, but the public perception is that New York City seems to hold all of the power in New York State. Do you think that this is true, Mr. Borrello, and what can be done about it?
I think all the power is in the fact that they are able to organize themselves and that they have been able to intimidate the upstate legislators into following their lead. But the reality is, we don't necessarily need the majority to get people, to have people caucusing together to get people to vote on things where, again, we have shared values. And this is what we did in the county legislature when I was there. We got folks to work together and make decisions based on principle and not on politics. And that can be done here. So does New York City hold a lot of the cards? Of course. But their population is about half of upstate. And if we can get like-minded people, especially those people in areas of downstate where they don't share those Manhattan values, we can overcome that. But it's going to take, again, people that can negotiate, people that have the ability to, and the track record to be able to reach across the aisle, but also to stay firm on our values and convince people that what they are supporting is not good.
Mr. Crandall?
They do hold the power. And if you look, a couple of years ago, there was a card going around, and it showed the cluster of power within the Assembly and the Senate, and as dots across the state. And it was pretty well solid in the New York area. The way that we're split and the way that we're districts are drawn, and we're going to be facing that again here shortly.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing for New York, and there's been talk of a different way to balance that out with a senator from every county, split the state into regions. I think some of that can be looked at and addressed going forward. But it is, Mr. Borrello talked about partisan and working together. It's really split so heavily right now on the state and the federal level that's very difficult to do. But they're holding the cards and they're not playing them right, in my opinion.
Difficult challenges, yes. Not impossible, no. I think it can be done. We've had it in the past, actually. The Republicans, when they controlled the Senate, did so because they had some Democrats that were willing to caucus with them. I don't think those people caucused for the right reasons. I think it was more about power and influence. But if we can get people to work together and vote together based on shared principles and values, we can overcome that.
And, this next question, Mr. Crandall, is right in the same category. A vast number of New Yorkers we see are leaving the state. Can this trend be reversed?
Well, I think it has to be reversed, and it's not going to happen under the current administration. When you have the legislation that has come out since the first of the year, some of what we've just talked about, and you have the rights of common people being, trampled on, and you have the high tax property taxes. I talked about the Medicaid and that program and how that is funded here in New York, different than the states that people are leaving to. It can be turned around. We have to turn around pieces of those legislation at a time. Medicaid and other things that can help this out. I started to talk about economic development and how I think that could be addressed in a different way or a better way than what has been in the past.
Yeah.
But all of these things add up to people leaving New York State. We need to turn that around, and this should be a place that people want to visit, not want to leave.
Mr. Borrello, can that trend be reversed?
Yes, it can be reversed. One of the most important things is that we have a skilled workforce, That's the most important thing to manufacturing. You know, the whole dog whistle issue that there's no jobs here is not true. I found that out in visiting 107 businesses in my first 100 days. So how do we keep our children here? By giving them opportunity. And how do we keep business here and grow business? By giving them what they need most, which is workforce. This is true across the country. If we can solve that issue here in this area, it is above taxes, it is above regulation, it's above the weather, which our governor seems to think is the problem or why everyone's leaving. And if we can solve the workforce challenge here, which is what we're doing here in Chautauqua County now, we've started to turn things around. JCC is now addressing this with my encouragement and others, and we're giving workforce development scholarships out now. That is the key here. We're never going to change 100%. We'll always push back against the high taxes. We'll always push back against the burdensome regulation. But what we can control here is workforce and workforce development, and that is the key to starting that, reversing that trend.
We need a business-friendly New York, and we have Alfred State, their technical college that has been turning out, you know, in the trades, the plumbers and the electricians and that, close to 100% placement for those folks. We need to have business stay here and grow here so that we do have jobs for those that would like to live here in New York.
And coming up after the break, we will talk a little bit more about economic initiatives and trying to bring back jobs and manufacturing to this district. But first, though, certainly doesn't seem that way this evening, but at times politics can be a little rancor, and to combat that a bit, Mr. Borrello, tell us something that you see in your opponent.
Something nice, you mean?
Yeah, something nice, please.
I've actually known Mr. Crandall, for a while at NYSAC. I've always felt that we've worked well together because, again, we all face the same challenges in leading county government. So I've enjoyed meeting him, getting to know him a little bit long before we were running in this race together. So I thank him for his support of NYSAC and all the good things that NYSAC does. And
Mr. Crandall, do you see a trait that you respect from Mr. Borrello?
I do. I think that he has stepped up and took the position of a county executive here, and not just settled in and following in the footsteps of what had been done, but looking at new and different ways to address things. So,
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Borrello, for this question? Or?
I actually like this question, and I like the opportunity, because when we see each other out and about, we're opponents, not enemies.
Right.
And that's what separates, I think, the United States of America from other areas. We can be civil. And right now, it's difficult out there in America. There's not a lot of civility, but I think we need a little bit more civility.
And, it certainly, just for us here at WNY News Now, we appreciate you being here and taking time for this forum. And for the both of you, I think a lot of people at home maybe don't realize, but within your party, it was kind of unexpected for Senator Young to just, leave politics and take a job in the private sector. So, for me, to both of you, and to anyone in politics, I appreciate you stepping up and running for office. And with that, we will take another break, and when we come back, we will hear more from the candidates as the WNY News Now GOP primary forum continues.
With coverage that matters, this is WNY News Now.
EagleZip.com is your local one-stop shop for all of your home and business computer needs. Located on Fluvan Avenue Extension, just outside of Jamestown, EagleZip.com sells and services all brands of desktops and laptops, as well as servers and network equipment for your business. All new computer sales include transferring your data from your old computer plus a 2-year warranty. Call EagleZip.com today.
Stop by EagleZip.com today and let us make computers easy for you.
And welcome back to the 2019 Republican primary forum for New York State Senate here on WNY News Now. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this evening and continuing, and thank you all so much as well. At home, at the grocery store, at work, maybe not, but wherever you're watching us from, we appreciate it. Mr. Crandall, this question is for you. What is the single most important asset that you would bring to State Senate?
Well, I think that my experience and in leadership, I've been what I said in my opening statement, that I have been chairman of the legislature for 14 years, and I've been a legislator since 2000. And I think that experience we have had in that period of time, the 14 years as chairman, we've addressed an awful lot of tough issues that I'd like to explain if there was time, but I mean some extremely difficult issues that we needed to have two-third majority, supermajority vote on our board. A lot of those weren't addressed before I got there and came along and built some consensus amongst our legislators. So I think that the experience and being able to shuttle things through legislation, if you will, I've got the experience. I've been there and done it a long time.
And Mr. Borrello, what would be your biggest asset that you would bring to the Senate?
I believe it's my proven track record of getting people to work together, to collaborate, to communicate better, and not just within county government, but across the broad spectrum. One of the things we did this year was to unite all of the feuding parties around Chautauqua Lake and develop the Chautauqua Lake consensus strategy. And for the first time ever, all of the major stakeholders around Chautauqua Lake working together, and we accomplished huge things this year, much more than ever before. And people have really thanked me on many occasions for taking that leadership role. And it's about making sure that you understand that what brings us together and what unites us is much greater than what divides us. No one thought we would get the consensus strategy. We had 16 stakeholders that we asked to sign this legally binding memorandum of agreement. And I was told it would never happen. And when it was all said and done in a very short period of time, 15 of those 16 stakeholders signed on, and we were able to do a record amount of treatment this year for a better, cleaner Chautauqua Lake.
Mr. Crandall, do you have anything to add?
The only thing that I would add is I go to Albany not owing any outside sources for campaign finance, and I think that's an important thing that the voters need to know about.
All right.
Can I get a rebuttal to that? Yes, that's a 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah.
So Mr. Crandall has talked about this before. I'm the endorsed Republican candidate. In a very short period of time, I raised $35,000 almost entirely from within this 57th Senate district, mostly in $25 and $50 increments from people that believe in me, believe in my message. And we both had the same opportunity. I was chosen overwhelmingly by the 4 county chairs, which is why I'm getting some additional resources from the people that are supposed to support the endorsed Republican candidate.
All right. Moving on.
I'd like to come back to that sometime if we can.
You could during your closing if you wanted to.
Thank you.
There is a great deal of debate right now regarding wind energy within this district. Where are you on these issues, Mr. Borrello? And if you oppose them, what would you do?
I am absolutely opposed to these industrial wind turbines. As I've said before, it's probably the biggest investment scam of the 21st century. It's not about renewable energy or reducing greenhouse gases. It's truly about trying to dominate this area with this investment that puts money in the pockets of a bunch of Wall Street LLCs and at the expense of our quality of life here. The governor couldn't get wind turbines off 30 miles offshore on Long Island. They shut him down. His well-heeled rich friends wouldn't let him do it. So he came up here and started waving money in front of poor communities. And I understand that people need the money, particularly our farmers who struggle. This is a program that should not exist to begin with. And if we have money to give to people, we don't need wind turbines on their property. Give them that money, because in the end, it costs taxpayers money. They do not make sense. They do not generate a profit ever. They need perpetual subsidies in the tunes of billions of dollars, and it needs to stop. It's going to ruin our quality of life here.
And Mr. Crandall, where do you stand in the wind farm debate?
This came up the other night, and I know that there's a project going on here that's well opposed in Chautauqua County, but there's also a project going on in the northern part of Cattaraugus and Allegheny County that is fairly well supported. So you have a couple of different approaches or spectrums, if you will, within the 57th district. The Board of Legislators in Allegheny County had not taken a position opposing what was being done in the northern part of the county, leaving that up to those local landowners and the process that's there with their with the public input forums and so forth. I've had volumes of information that have been given to me on both sides of the issue. They're certainly heavily subsidized. If you look at how they're funded, you and I wouldn't put one in our backyard. We'd never be able to afford it without the subsidies.
Mr. Borrello, do you have anything to add?
I would say that the county legislature, back when I was a legislator, we stood united against the ridiculous idea of putting wind turbines in Lake Erie. That's coming up again. Bad ideas tend to come around again, and we will fight again against that. As a legislature, we stood united, passing legislation telling the IDA to no longer give pilot programs. We're going to give tax breaks to these wind turbines that also suck up billions of taxpayer dollars, all for the benefit of a bunch of Wall Street LLCs. Absolutely not. I'm very clear on this. I'm not wishy-washy. I'm opposed.
All right. Moving on to our next question, which is also another big issue that a lot of people talk about within this district. It's known as the Rust Belt, much of Western New York. And a lot of people say they leave because they can't find a good job, or they graduate from college and they can't find a job in their field. How would you work if elected to State Senate, Mr. Crandall, to bring good careers back here?
Well, I think that there has been a lot of good career opportunities that have opened up. And we've had that not just in Allegheny County, but across. You've got a lot of opportunities in agriculture. I think that they'll say that the agriculture, the family farm is dying, but certainly we need to have processing and ways to be able to expand our agriculture. We have a couple of processing plants in Allegheny County, cheese plant and Saputo that has been known as Friendship Dairy. Both of those have had expansion opportunities and employ more people, but it goes beyond that in utilizing some of the other facilities that are there. We had an empty building up by the airport that is now expanding and employing a number of people and looking to expand again. That opportunities are there if we can invest in the right project.
Mr. Borrello?
We've been working on this in a number of venues. First and foremost for agriculture, which is the #1 industry in Chautauqua County and is struggling. We're in the process of something called Project Grow Chautauqua, something I spearheaded to create a game-changing, vertically integrated agribusiness that will not only help Chautauqua County, but will spread across the southern tier in the 57th district and allow farmers to successfully get into the business of hops and small grains to supplement their businesses. We're in the middle of a extensive feasibility study funded in part by our county legislature and with support of the gentleman who's taking this on and also our local foundations. I'm proud of that. We also are working on, I just proposed something that I would be the first piece of legislation I would introduce in the state Senate, and that is the first employee tax credit. Small business is the backbone of the United States, and as well as New York State and upstate New York in particular. This would give a credit to someone who goes from a sole proprietorship to hiring their first employee, which is a big, costly step.
Mr. Crandall, do you have anything to add?
There's a bioenergy project that had been started, and it actually was a joint venture, or we both invested in it, Cattaraugus and Allegheny County, that I would like to see move forward. And it doesn't matter where it lands as far as I'm concerned, as long as it's in the 57th district. But it's a very interesting project that takes low-end, fast-growing willow, that type of thing, processes it. It comes out the end as heating pellets, but it's really the extractions in between that are that have the value, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, that type of thing. So,
Mr. Borrello, did you want to have another? We can move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Another big issue that I think a lot of people probably were talking about today, if they visit our website and see our top story, a road in Cattaraugus County washed out because of heavy rains. Infrastructure is a huge thing. Everyone talks about potholes come springtime, right? How would you, Mr. Borrello, get more funding from Albany to improve the roads in our neighborhoods?
Yeah, the governor has been eroding our investments in infrastructure. You know, he recently took away the AIM money, which is assistance to local municipalities. Our CHIPS funding isn't what it used to be, and this needs to be. We need to be refocused on what's important. The problem is the governor and the state legislature like to give away a lot of money to a lot of people that truly don't deserve it. $27 million, for example, to give the children of illegal immigrants free college. At the same time, they wouldn't give it to the children of our Gold Star families, those people who have died in the service of our country and would like to have their children go to college at no charge, but they said no to that in the state legislature. So we need to bring around some common sense. And again, unite those upstate values so that we can reverse that cycle by saying we're going to invest in these things that are important to the people in New York, like our infrastructure, critically important for our economic commerce, critically important for our quality of life, critically important for returning us, returning people to upstate New York, and we will fight hard for that.
Mr. Crandall, how would you improve infrastructure?
Well, there has to be more funding for it and prioritize it. The government has a place, and infrastructure, roads, bridges, our sewer and water, these are the things that the government, one of their main roles. And what we've seen is a shift to a lot of social programs. Look at the legislation that's come out since the first of the year. The abortion issue and these type of things, looking at the Second Amendment rights. We really need to get back to the basics and use our resources, financial resources, where they need to be. Infrastructure is certainly there, along with some economic development, but it has to be prioritized and done properly.
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Borrello?
I would just say that once again, our governor, our state legislature have proven that their number one priority is preserving their own power, and that's why you see our infrastructure, failing all over the state, because they are spending their time, their money, our money, and their energy on solidifying their stranglehold on New York State and not focusing on important things like infrastructure. So it is once again a shameful example of what goes on every day in Albany.
All right. Thank you both. Our hour is almost through, but when we come back, we will hear the candidates' final thoughts after this.
Well, hey, my name's Dave Wilfong, and I want to be the mayor of the city of Jamestown. I grew up in the city of Jamestown, graduated from Jamestown High School, and after graduation, I went into the U.S. Army for 4 years. When I came back to Jamestown, I noticed that Jamestown had taken a different road, a road that I wasn't happy with. In 2014, I was elected as Chautauqua County representative from District 11 in the city of Jamestown. I promised my constituents 3 things: that I would lower taxes, I would cut wasteful spending in government, and I would decrease the size of government. And I'm proud to say that I've done all 3 things. I think we need to move Jamestown to the manufacturing base that it once knew and was actually king of at one time. We need to provide shovel-ready sites. We need to provide a workforce that's ready to take on those jobs and bring the tax base back to Jamestown and make Jamestown the American city that it used to be and still can be. My name's Dave Wilfong. I'm running for mayor of the city of Jamestown. Please vote for me on primary day, June 25th. The polls are open from 12 to 9. Thank you so much.
You're watching WNY News Now, where coverage comes first.
Want weather now? Download the WNY News Now mobile app and stay up to date on severe weather alerts. Plus, anytime hazardous weather strikes, stick with the Southern Tier's only 24/7 streaming network that keeps you safe. You're all in a tornado warning, so now is the time to go to a safe place, small room, lowest floor, near the center, away from windows. What are you waiting for? Download the WNY News Now mobile app today. It's free in the Apple App Store and Google Play Store.
And welcome back. Our final question for both of you this evening. Former State Senator Kathy Young left in quite an unprecedented way recently, and she left an unprecedented legacy, certainly for many people. Really enjoyed her time serving this district. If elected, what will be your legacy? And this question is for Mr. Crandall first.
Well, I think that those are big shoes to fill. Senator Young was certainly popular all across the district, and the reason was she was there all the time. And as I've traveled and visited with people that I hadn't before, you bring her name up, and she was there. She was there at every event that she could possibly make. And although that'll be difficult, I enjoy traveling the district. I know the district very well, and I don't think that that'll be a problem to keep that up. I also think that my leadership and what I will take to this position, I have said before that I don't think that the New York State can stay in the state it's in. The pendulum is going to swing back. The Senate Republicans will once again be in power, and I would like to be in position to be able to utilize the leadership experience that I've had and take that to Albany.
Mr. Borrello.
You know, Kathy Young was an amazing leader, an effective leader, and she certainly did a lot for this district. As I've said many times, even though she lived in Olean and I live on the north end of this county, it felt like she lived next door. And that will be her legacy, her ability to be there and work with people. I believe my legacy, to answer your question, will be that I was able to effectively collaborate and communicate and get things accomplished, because this is the record I have. As a county legislator, as a county executive, is to get things to happen that some people thought were impossible, because I'm willing to take a stand, even if people don't all agree with me. Sometimes you have to stand for something in order to get things accomplished, and I have a strong track record of doing that. So that will be, I believe, my legacy. I have traveled Chautauqua County. I took over the previous county executive's car 18 months ago with 36,000 miles on it, and I just turned 93,000 miles. Wow. So I'm not afraid of traveling either. It's not about sitting at a desk and signing papers. It's about being out there with the people, and I certainly learned that from Senator Kathy Young.
Great. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Crandall, or are you ready to move on?
Big shoes to fill, yeah. And everyone across the district was certainly disappointed to see her leave, but happy for her next chapter.
All right. That does it for our debate this evening. It is now time for 2 minutes of closing remarks. Mr. Borrello, you did win the coin toss, but you did defer for Mr. Crandall to start, so he will start with the closing remarks.
Okay.
I want to circle back and address the Republican endorsement, if you will, of Mr. Borrello. That happened with 3 men in the room, 4 men in the room, if you will. It was a meeting that I walked out of. You will hear him say that I was soured and only point to his finance being handled out of the Senate Republican because of that. But take a look and see how much money has been spent on his campaign by the Senate Republican campaign committee. It's tens of thousands of dollars. And you don't have to look far to see an ad that says paid for by. And I don't think that all's fair in politics and in love and war, I guess. But I just think that the people should know that. And Mr. Borrello is going to go up there beholding to some people from out of this district. There were people brought in to pass his petitions. I was asked to step down so there wouldn't be a primary. And I am the only candidate that is going to go to Albany and be an independent voice for the people of the 57th District. Despite what Mr. Borrello says about being selected by the Republicans, this stinks to a little bit, and I can live with that, but I just think that the people need to know and follow the money, folks. It's an awful lot of money has been spent on his campaign through the Senate Republican Campaign Committee, which is operated by Mr. Flanagan, and Mr. Akshar, Senator Akshar, is the one that is the chairman of that, take a peek at his record. I'll stand on my independent voice for the 57th in Albany.
All right, Mr. Borrello, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you very much. You know, I've run a positive campaign because I'm able to talk about the great things I've accomplished as a legislator and a county executive. We have great things going on here in Chautauqua County. We have a positive attitude. We reversed the cycle of decline. For the first time ever, we've had a year-over-year increase in jobs. I'm very proud of that. We're focused now on the things that are important to our manufacturing base, like workforce development. We're getting people united, working together, and you're seeing the positive results of that in a short period of time. So I'm proud that I have a lot to talk about. And not only that, but I'm proud of what I know I can do in Albany with my track record of collaboration and communication and negotiation. All those things we've done here to unite people in our economic development strategy for the first time ever countywide, to unite people around Chautauqua Lake for the first time ever, and it led to a record amount of positive in-lake treatments that will now, for hopefully generations to come, make Chautauqua Lake usable. All the things that we've done to get people to work together, regardless of party, regardless of location, bringing people together, that is the strong track record that I can bring. You know, and I understand that Mr. Crandall wants to kind of get down in the mud on this issue. I wish that that wasn't the case, but the bottom line is this. As I said before, I raised a lot of money from people, small donations, that people believe in me, believe in my message, and the support that I'm receiving from the Senate Republican Campaign Committee is the same support that he would have received if he had been the chosen candidate. That's the reality, folks. And once again, we are here because we have to talk about what's most important to all of us. And what can we do to make sure that our voice is heard loud and clear more than 300 miles from here back to the state capitol. And that is going to take someone with a strong track record of being able to communicate and collaborate. I am certainly the person with that experience, and I look forward and will be humbled to be able to represent you all as the next senator from the 57th Senate District.
All right, Mr. Borrello, Mr. Crandall, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And for you watching live, stay connected with WNY News Now on WNYNewsNow.com. Download our mobile app, search WNY News Now on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store, and follow us on all forms of social media at WNY News Now. And we are looking for your feedback right now as an online live poll is open. What did you think of this evening's debate? Who will you be voting for come Election Day? You can vote right now anonymously at WNYNewsNow.com/poll. I'm Justin Gould for WNY News Now. Good night.